Hey friends, welcome to First Look. We made it through. Lent and Holy Week and all that is, I imagine it's probably a lot for everybody, on some level. You're either um, participating in a lot of different services, or you're preparing for people to come into town, or you're traveling, or you're just uh, sort of maybe it's emotionally hectic, just sort of all the Lent and Holy Week and Good Friday and all of that. Um, yeah, it's a lot for sure. But I do want to say before I forget just how unbelievably grateful I am. And if you're watching this and you want to pass this along to somebody, I would appreciate it. We had a number of people who did some extraordinary work. Um, First, I want to thank my colleagues who always um, put forth a tremendous amount of effort to make um, this time of year something to remember, something that's not only a lot of depth to it, but just make it special. And they do a lot of work. And um, so to Stephen and Diana and Tim and Sarah and Bob, I just want to thank you for being the people that you are. Because not only do you make my life much easier, but you um, add so much to what Northmont is, and I thank you for that. Also, I want to thank the leadership and folks who put together the Good Friday experience, the choir first of all, and then also all those who put together the dinner that we had. You know who you are, and so I'm thanking you personally for that. It was great. It was a meaningful experience to be able to gather together for a meal, and then to move into that worship experience. And then you leave, and it's silent, and it's there's some kind of feeling still kind of reverberating. And then you come back for Easter, and it was just a tremendous thing. And so thank you for those who made that possible. So that's the experience. That's kind of a wrap. But then, much like Christmas, the real season begins. Christmas is every day afterwards, right? The weeks afterwards are the season of Christmas. The season of Easter is now, right? This is the time that we reflect on and try to live into what it means to be resurrection people. You've heard that phrase before, and so I'll use it again. That's what we're doing. And so the stories that come afterwards are really that kind of aftermath experience of how do we get our heads around this. And the value of them, whether we're talking about the Jesus meeting the disciples on the road to Emmaus, or this story here where we're talking about Jesus meeting with the disciples and meeting with Thomas, is really just us trying to relive or experience the newness of this reality. You and I are now, 2,000 years removed from that being a fresh experience, but we're still grappling with it. But we also need to be able to experience it in a new and different way, and that's why we keep revisiting these stories every year, so that we get a little taste of that again. So we're moving from Luke to John. And so this is John 20, verses 19 through 31. And when you read that passage, I'm not going to read it word for word for you, just because I think that, one, you know bits of it, but two, I'd like you to read it maybe on your own. I think that might be more meaningful. But 19 through 31 comes, of course, after the resurrection story, and now Jesus is appearing to the disciples and then having this conversation with Thomas. So Jesus is appearing to them, extending peace to them. Thomas isn't there. So then Thomas is then able to see Jesus. Unless I see the mark in his side, I won't believe. And then, and then Jesus does show up in his presence, and Thomas, of course, falls on his face and is revering Jesus. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. That's how it ends. Oh, I'm sorry. It doesn't end right there. We go on to 31. Now, Jesus did many other signs that are not written in this book, but these are written so that we may come to believe in Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. And that the title of this sermon is something like, "Can we rest easy now?" And I was thinking, my initial reasoning for saying that was, you get to this triumphant moment, you get to this place of resurrection, and because we know the person of Jesus, we know what will happen. We know that he'll be here, and among the disciples, and then he'll ascend. We know where that story goes. Is this a moment when we can actually start to catch our breath? And it's interesting that at no point in the story do you ever really see that. That's not the experience of the disciples. It's not what happens for them. It doesn't ever seem like there's a moment where they kind of catch their breath and all of a sudden it's okay. And I always think it's kind of interesting because they had 3 years with Jesus and they had enough time to reflect, and I think it never seems like at any point does Scripture talk about it like they're catching their breath, like they know what to do now. There's no conversation where Peter and James and John get together with Jesus and say, okay, now you're resurrected. Now we can really, everyone is going to fear you. Now who are you? Now we all saw you crucified. This is the time where you could put the fear of God into everyone. There's no doubt here that you are, the Son of God. That conversation never happens. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's interesting that it doesn't. Because you'd think that at some point, we often talk about whether people can change or not. Some pieces of us change, but maybe some pieces are always the same. And what's fascinating is that in the time that Jesus is here, I don't see this. I guess the shock just never kind of wears off, because there's no story that makes you think they've settled in, they've taken this for granted maybe, and they're still on the same path. Part of me always kind of thinks that they will look at Jesus, and once they get their mind around the fact that he had actually resurrected, that they would say, maybe this is just my American mentality, but okay, how do we milk this for all it's worth? How do we take this event, take this experience, and build an army around it? Because who wouldn't want to be on the right side of history here? You've got the Son of Man in front of you who just resurrected, who just not only beat the Romans, but beat death. And now he's here to take names. now it's like you messed around. Now you're going to find out exactly who God is. And that never really happens. There's no revenge moment. I don't even see anything where someone supposes that could happen. Now, Judas is no longer with us. And it makes you think some of that mentality, right? Like, Judas is the most fascinating disciple to me by far. Not only because of what he does, but how I think he gets there. Like what I think we're supposed to think of the person of Judas. Because if I'm like anybody, I'm more like Judas, right? And so because we can only see, we can't see past our own self-interest. We can't see past our own vision for the world. If someone tells us that we're wrong, we fight it to the end, So, Judas is this person who I think represents a lot more of us than we would like to admit most of the time. So, with him out of the way, and I think he must have had this influence, you think maybe, right? When the disciples were trying to figure out who's going to be on your left and who's going to be on your right and all that, I wonder if that conversation started, if Judas started that conversation, not in a evil, maniacal kind of way. Like, I don't think of Judas as like Gargamel from the Smurfs, like he's not this like conniving figure in my mind. I think he's passionate and I think he's driven, but I don't think the guilt swallows him whole if he's an evil person. I just don't. I think that I think the reason why it ends for him the way it ends is because he feels like I can't believe that I have participated in this. This is, the guilt is that. Maniacal people. You've seen maniacal people. You've watched what they do. You've watched how they recover. They don't care that you don't like them. They don't care that they're the villain. They care about power. They care about influence. They care about gravitas. They care about, being in charge. That's not what happens with Judas. He can't handle it. So I think that I wonder, I guess, if there's some part of his influence that once it's gone, you don't see the disciples acting in that way anymore. They just kind of follow, like they got it, right? Like without that influence and with the resurrection now behind them, they kind of get it. They get that they're not doing business as usual. And I think the evidence of that comes in the fact that they start the church, that we see in Acts, that's where they go. They go with, okay, we get it now. What we were thinking, what people were telling us, what we imagined, that's not what this is. This is something else. And now we have to lead into it. Any selfish or self-important way of thinking needs to be put down, because this is where it is. And I think when we move to Thomas, who I think again gets a really bad rap. Doubting Thomas for all of eternity is this is an awful thing. Like, can we give the guy a break? The other disciples doubted it too. I mean, they didn't know what the women came and said this is what happened. They're like, okay, like slowly roll. And Thomas is like, he didn't say it's impossible. I don't believe you. Like, all of you are lying. I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. Like, this isn't like, he just says, I gotta see it for myself. I have to see it for myself. And so he has this connection with Jesus, who I think, as much as he tries to get him on a more secure path, he treats him with a lot of compassion. And I think, again, the way that that's represented, at least the way I see it here, is that Thomas represents a lot of the ways that we want to experience our faith. We want to experience as something that is, I don't know that I can believe this unless it's right in front of me. Now, I think that obviously there's something to be said for being able to believe something without seeing. But it also doesn't prevent Thomas from continuing to show up. I have to look back. I did a sermon on this last year, I think, or maybe it was the year before, where I was talking about Thomas. What's amazing about Thomas is that he doesn't give up. He doesn't allow what happened to Jesus. He doesn't run. He doesn't run off. He doesn't leave. He doesn't. And he comes back. He returns. He listens to Jesus. He doesn't let that deter him. He doesn't let oh, I should have believed them. I shouldn't have doubted at all. He doesn't let that. He doesn't get so self-absorbed into that feeling that he can't go forward. He shows a great deal of poise in continuing to be the disciple that he was called to be. And I think that learning from something and moving on, moving forward is such a huge part of what discipleship looks like, and what being a person of faith looks like. Recognizing that we're not always going to get it in the ideal way, and still continuing to move forward. But back to what I named the sermon, which was, "Can we breathe easy now?" I chose that title because the answer in my head was, well, no, we can't breathe easy now. Meaning, this isn't the time to just sit back and kind of, let things unfold the way they're going to unfold. This is the time to say, okay, we have Jesus in our midst. We have this this opportunity to share with the world, what we can do and what we can be. Where can we take this? And it should fuel action. That was kind of the thought. But since I've been I try to look ahead as I'm preaching and kind of see where things are going. Part of me thinks that, can we breathe easy now? That maybe some of the answer is yes. And the reason I say that is that, sometimes I tend to, you know, really, um, here's an example. You go on vacation, you spend all this time, money, effort, whatever, trying to get to vacation. You get to vacation, and, maybe this isn't you, but some of us end up not enjoying it the way we want to because we're thinking about the next day, or we're planning out the next whatever, or we're trying to figure out the meal, or we're trying to, we never actually allow ourselves a minute to just absorb something and breathe and bask in it, right? You do all that work and whatever to get to that place, and then you don't actually end up enjoying the thing. You miss the whole point. And part of me feels like, I wonder when they felt like they got that opportunity. When were the disciples able to put down, the guilt and hurt and everything that, and trauma that came with Thursday and Friday, and then to have this unbelievable kind of should just make you want to weep experience of Sunday, and then try to get your mind around it and just try to bask in the fact that it's better than you could ever imagine, that the story somehow is better than you thought it would be. And I don't think I give it enough, give myself enough time to kind of absorb that. And that's part of what I'm kind of wrestling with now as I'm thinking about how I want to approach the sermon. Because all of that reflection should come with something. You should be able to kind of sit with it. Yeah, it happens when you graduate sometimes too. When you graduate from, a college or a grad school. You've if you're lucky, you got a job right away and you're starting soon, or you're thinking about moving or doing the next thing or doing whatever, the next adventure, the next, this and that. We don't sit and savor things very well. I don't. Maybe you do. I don't do that very well. And I think one of the things that I'd like to be able to do, I feel like, is talk about Easter like it's something that we could actually savor. I'm thinking about it in real time, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. It's an interesting thought because you want to just get to the next thing. But I think that one of the things I've been thinking about, which is a fascinating part of being in a place now for some time, I haven't been here for 2 years. I've been here for 7 years. Now, 7 years isn't forever, but it's enough time to kind of see the long term, to look forward in years instead of months. And, what do I hope for Northmont? What do I hope for myself in the years to come? Where I can actually sit and we can say, hey, look what we have been able to do together. Look who you are together. And make a plan. So can we rest easy? I don't know. Maybe we never actually do, but we can try. Maybe we can't rest easy for the rest of time, but we can for a while, and that's a faithful thing too. So I've been thinking about that, and I wonder the same. There's so much of the story of these disciples that we will never have. We can only kind of suppose. We know the most about Peter and James and John. We know some about guys like Thomas. But some of those disciples we don't really know much about at all. what were they thinking? What were they feeling? How are they experiencing this? Um, all of it is just so much. So I don't know. I'd like to maybe explore that in my head a little bit this week. We'll see. All right. Well, I think that's about what I was thinking through here for today. Remember that over the next couple of weeks, well, very soon we're looking forward to having Dave Antonson's with us here the first Sunday in May. And so we're kind of getting ready for that, and we'll talk about that a little bit next week. But yeah, we're just kind of moving through the centennial piece too, which has been a blessing. So just things to be thinking about and looking forward to on the horizon. Okay. Well, thank you for doing this. Thanks for, continuing to kind of look at what Easter looks like for us. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you again for all the ways you participated in Holy Week and made it as meaningful and wonderful and deep as you did. If you need anything this week, please let me know. And so until I see you again, have a wonderful week, and I will see you for another First Look. Take care.